Cumberland traffic, Copeland 4041 uniform, departing 11 right on track.
Welcome to Soaring the Sky, a glider pilot's podcast. Hello, my name is Chuck. I will be your host, coming to you from the Mid-Atlantic region here in the United States and flying with the Cumberland Soaring Group. This is episode 42. This episode is brought to you by Arizona Soaring Incorporated, the nation's largest provider of professional glider training. Since 1969, they provided training from initial private through CFI glider and entry level through advanced aerobatics. Open year-round, 7 days a week. More information is available at azsoaring.com. Our guest today had his first glider flights in 1972, before his senior year of high school, where he flew at the Civil Air Patrol Illinois Wing Flight Encampment. During the 8 days, he had 29 flights and soloed. In 1974, he had the opportunity to be part of the CAP exchange program, where he traveled to the UK and flew a side-by-side glider from World War II. In 1980, he completed his SEL rating and had hoped to continue flying, but that didn't work out. Fast forward to 1996, he rejoined the CAP near his home at Sky Soaring Glider Club, where he completed his add-on private glider rating and his commercial glider rating, and later receiving his CFIG. Currently, he has over 1,250 glider flights, with several hundred of them flying CAP cadets. Join us now as Stephen Snyder shares his aviation adventure, Soaring the Sky. Stephen Snyder, welcome to Soaring the Sky. How are you today?
I'm fine, thanks, Chuck. Been looking forward to this.
Great. Yeah, we chatted a while back, and it's good to catch up with you and get to interview you. So when did your aviation adventure begin?
I would say it started when I think I was 14, which would take us back to about 1967. And I was introduced to Civil Air Patrol by a school friend at the time. I knew that I was interested in learning more about flying. I certainly didn't know a heck of a lot at the time, but it seemed like a neat thing to do. I think it was between my junior and senior year in high school. I spent a week at a Civil Air Patrol flight camp, and we were flying gliders for the whole week, and by the end of the week I had soloed. So it was a great way to get started.
Oh, very cool. So what did you first fly and what did you solo in?
We were flying the venerable Schweitzer 222 back in that day. As you know from your experience, they're big and heavy and slow, but very similar to the 233s, which is so popular today.
But good training aircraft for sure.
Great for starters.
So where did your journey take you after that?
Well, then when I graduated high school, I was looking around for something to do and wasn't sure about school. I was thinking about the Air Force, and that didn't work out. So ended up over the next 5 or 6 years, I was able to work on my single engine rating, and I was able to get that. But never did get into a career in flying, so it was just a hobby. About that time, I got married, started having kids, job, whole routine. I'm sure you've heard from many people, and flying kind of went to the wayside. So took a hiatus, but I knew someday I'm going to get back into this. And sometime around 97, 98, I found a glider club not too far from my house, and they had a Civil Air Patrol glider there. And so I got back into CAP and got back into gliding, and I've been going strong ever since.
What aircraft were you flying when you got back into it?
Primarily 233s and L-23s, the Blanik L-23.
So what are you flying now?
The club I belong to, we have a variety of gliders, a couple of 233s. And we have a Krosno, which is a good two-seater, and a Lark, a twin Lark, which is also good for instruction. And then we have 126 and a 134 and a PW5. So we have a fairly nice fleet at our club.
What glider club are you flying out of?
It's called Sky Soaring Glider Club, and Sky Soaring is located almost exactly 30 miles northwest of O'Hare Airport. if any of your listeners are looking at a sectional, just follow the Class B airspace straight west, and then you'll see our little glider symbol just on the northwest edge of the Class B airspace.
Is it a fairly big club? Do you have a lot of members?
We have over 80 members typically.
Oh, yeah, that's a strong club.
Pretty good size, and we're known for training, so we have a lot of students of all ages, but we have a lot of student flying.
So what are you currently flying?
Well, as an instructor, I spend a lot of time in the two-seat gliders. If I get a chance to fly by myself, I enjoy flying the 126, and I know you've mentioned that yourself. Occasionally, I'll fly in the PW5, which is just a little bit more performance than a 126. It's not something you're going to set any records in, especially in Illinois. We're fairly flat here, so it's either a good thermal day or you're not going very far. Now, I believe we talked briefly about winch launch. Did you ever get a chance to try that out?
I have not gotten to that yet. I still would like to do that. Have you done some winch launching?
Yes, that was what I was going to say. I was fortunate enough to have been able to get my ground launch endorsement because our club has built a winch, and so now we supplement our aerotow with the winch launching. And finding that not only a lot of fun, but it's a good experience and a good secondary method of training for pilots, either rated pilots or student pilots that want to expand their opportunities. We find the winch is very inexpensive to fly off of, and although you don't get a lot of altitude, you get a lot of takeoff and landing experience. So the two work well hand in hand between aerotow and winch launching.
How was the transition for you going from aerotow to winch launch?
Actually, it wasn't that bad. The idea is to get the first two or three out of the way, and then it gets pretty simple. The first one is always rather exhilarating. It's definitely a roller coaster type of ride. But after you've done a few of them, it's pretty much just fine. You're just looking at the ground a little differently because you're going up at such a steep angle. We encourage our members to do both.
Yeah, I think for me that would be the big deal to begin with. But your attitude is definitely different than if you're doing an aerotow with the tow plane. It seems like you just see a lot of sky.
Yeah. You really have to train yourself to look to the side. You're looking at your wingtip for angle of attack, and that's, then you can look down somewhat to the side and see what your relative position is. If you're going, to get into the end of the rope and the nose starts to come down, you know where you're at. You're pretty much on top of the winch.
And that would be when you release.
Right. If you don't, it's going to release itself. Pretty much you're going to overrun the rope, and it's going to pull the back release. On almost any glider, you can count on that.
Is that a normal thing? I guess my question would be, if somebody doesn't release, it will release automatically?
It should release automatically. It's certainly something you train for, the inevitable, if it didn't. But it's something you can pretty much count on, that once you get past the vertical position, the releases are going to open up automatically.
What's the procedure if it did not release?
The winch operator has a guillotine. He can cut that rope. That's probably the most likely. Haven't seen it, haven't had to do that yet, so I'm not sure just how you would explain it. But the winch operator is watching you the whole time, and if he sees that you're released, he can cut that rope. And generally, if it isn't releasing, it's because you're holding too much back pressure on the stick, and so you've got the cable so tight that it can't relax. But fortunately, that's a pretty unlikely, pretty rare situation.
Yeah, but it's always good to have that extra safety in there.
Part of the training.
Yeah, exactly. Out of the winch launch flights, and then the aerotow too, any of those, is there a flight that stands out maybe in your logbook?
Well, that's a good question. I was wondering what I would answer to that. I don't have any of the great stories that some of your other guests have had. I've never flown the Alps or even the Rocky Mountains. I did get a flight at Blue Ridge Soaring in the Appalachians. My one land out would probably rate as a memorable experience. When I landed off airport from Chicago to Lake Juneau, Wisconsin. It's probably about 40 miles from our airport, from our glider field. So that was something to remember. Unfortunately, it was early spring, so the field that I landed in was very early bean crop. It was an easy one to negotiate. And other than that, some of my longest flights have actually been on tow. I don't know if you've done aero tow, you typically go to 3,000 feet and get off. But I've had the opportunity to relocate several gliders over the years on aero tow. And so I've done some 2.5, almost 3-hour flights behind the tow plane. And so those are always interesting. Sometimes boring, but sometimes they're definitely not. There was one flight when we were bringing a glider from Springfield, Illinois, back to Chicago, and we had to literally fly over the city with no place to land out, and it was an extremely turbulent flight, and so that was probably stands out in my mind as memorable. If I was ever scared about not completing a flight, that was probably the one.
What was your altitude over the city?
It was still pretty low. We may have been 1,500 feet above ground at that point, and eventually we climbed out. We were able to get out of that area, but at the time we took off, we were just getting going. It was very low, and we were desperately looking for alternatives if we had to, because you don't want to have a rope break over a city environment. You just don't know what you're going to find.
Yeah, that's not something that most people would even think about, but pretty interesting to be on tow over a city like that, and then just hope that everything goes well, and then turbulence on top of that. That must have been quite the adventure.
Yeah. It was, it's quite intimidating at the time. But, most of your glider pilots are going to talk about, we fly somewhere and then we disassemble and we put it in a trailer. But that's not always the case. Sometimes it just isn't convenient, or you don't have a trailer, or you don't have the time. On a bigger glider, if you've seen the Blanik L23, it's a big glider and it's heavy. So taking it apart is not always easy. And have you ever had the pleasure of disassembling a 233? That we try to do that at least once a year just to put them away for the winter. But when you want to take one on a 300 or 400 mile journey to another destination, it's not so convenient to take it apart and try to put it on a trailer. So.
No, absolutely not. So
I've flown from one end of the state of Illinois to the other, and that's quite a trip.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't want to land the 233 out and then have to disassemble it.
No. I've seen that done a couple of times, and that's not a whole lot of fun.
No. So if you would give some advice to someone on how to be a better and safer pilot that you've found over the years, being an instructor and also a pilot, taking your own flights, what would you say to them?
I think the thing that stands out, not so much the students, but a lot of the veteran pilots, the seasoned guys who have been around a long time, don't fly enough. They don't get out. They may come out and fly 2 or 3 flights a year. I think getting out more frequently would be a major step forward in improving their skills and their safety. If you do anything in life and you do it once or twice a year, you're probably not going to be very good at it. So definitely my recommendation is fly more often and fly with a partner. It doesn't have to be an instructor necessarily, but fly with somebody who is frequent and get the rust off, as they say. We talk about spring checkouts, but I would like to see pilots get out and fly with others on a regular basis. I imagine at your club they should talk, similar about, when you come out, be sure you're comfortable, that you know what you can do and how long has it been and you want to get out and go with somebody else on the first flight or two.
Yeah, that's actually like the first conversation we have, especially if we know somebody hasn't been in the glider port for a while. We're like, hey, what have you been up to? Have you done any flying? Who are you flying with today for your first couple flights? And definitely what we do, because yeah, it's important. If you haven't been up there in a while, we forget things, and it's good to keep the practice going and stay current. Even if you've been on the simulator, it's still good to get out there and fly with somebody else before you start flying around.
Absolutely. Yeah, don't be shy, and don't hesitate to ask for somebody to go with you for a couple, and get yourself back in, and then keep coming out. Don't limit yourself to once a month or once every 3 months. The other thing is bring a friend, bring somebody else out that has never flown, and share the experience with other people. At our club, we do have some sightseeing flights. We try not to interfere with our club operations, but if somebody wants to bring a friend out, or somebody wants to buy a gift certificate for a spouse or a friend, we encourage that, because the whole point is to get more people exposed to soaring, and young or old, it doesn't really matter. Just come out and have a good time.
Yeah, absolutely. And, a lot of people are aware of flying and general aviation, but there's quite a few of them that aren't aware of gliders. And the question I get a lot is, you fly, what do you fly? And then you tell them, they're like, what, glider? What do you, like a hang glider? And there's always that question, like, what do you mean?
How do you get up there? And how do you stay up there? How long do you stay up there? Say, well, let's go for a flight and I'll show you.
Yeah, exactly. What a great way to show them the world of soaring and what we get to enjoy.
There's so much to be said for the sport, but not enough people talking about it. So
yeah, exactly.
The more we can do to spread the word, the better.
Well, that's what we're trying to do, Stephen, here on the podcast. And I definitely appreciate you coming on here and telling your story and sharing with the listeners. And it's been good having you. I appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate what you're doing. And as I said when we started out, this isn't going to be the most exciting interview. I don't do any cross-country racing, or I've never flown the Pearl into 90,000 feet. But it's the average guys that we're looking for and we're talking to. And there's a lot of them out there that need to hear this. So let's continue to share it.
Absolutely.
All right, sir.
Thank you, Stephen.
My pleasure.
And thank you for joining us for another great guest here on Soaring the Sky. Please spread the word about the podcast to your friends and at your local glider port, so we can continue to grow and keep bringing you more aviation adventures like this one. Our aviation journey continues next week when we join our friends at Lake Keepit Soaring Club in Australia, the home of the 10th FAI Women's World Gliding Championship, where their soaring season is just now getting started. Until then, you can check out all of our previous episodes, and if you haven't had your first soaring adventure yet, check out the SSA.org to find out where you can jump into the cockpit at your local glider port. Also, you can find us on social media, and for more information on that, here's Michelle.
On Facebook, it's Soaring the Sky Podcast. On Instagram, it's the same. If you would like to say hi, just drop Chuck a line at chuck@soaringthesky.com, or you can send us a note on the website. That's soaringthesky.com. Also, if you're a pilot, we want to hear your story. Just send us an email and Chuck will get in touch with you. We hope you join us next week for another great guest and adventure on Soaring the Sky.